Music for this episode of About to Break is provided by Cat Beach Music. Whether you're looking to score an entire film or just need to find the perfect vibe for your next commercial project, our friends Bobby and Jen Hartree have what you're looking for. Check them out today at catbeachmusic.com. Hello, friends. You're listening to episode 88 of the About to Break podcast. I'm your host, Taylor Hughes, and this is the show. This is the one where we talk to artists and entertainers about the ups and downs of life in the entertainment business. And this is one of the episodes I recorded while I was in Nashville performing at House of Cards. I'm so excited. This is Harris III. He's a great illusionist and magician and storyteller. In fact, storytelling became such a huge part of his life and his shows, and now he heads up the story gatherings and the story conference that are happening. The story conference is coming up here in Nashville in just a couple of days. Still some time for you to check that out, but it was a great conversation, and I want to get into it right away. It was so good. What's going on with us? Let's see. We just got back from a little trip up to my in-laws. They weren't in town, but it's always nice when you go somewhere and you have like a place to crash that is nice. It's not like a La Quinta Inn or something. Not that there's anything wrong with that, especially if La Quinta wants to sponsor the podcast. But, you know, it's nice when you can go and you can stay someplace that feels like home. And their house is just so fantastic. We were up there. I did a show. And then I did 3 shows, actually. And then I get to see a buddy, Robert Hall, perform at the Loft, where I'm going to be in a few weeks. And that was an amazing performance by him. And then we came back home, and let's see what's going on. I go to Vegas tonight. If you're in Las Vegas tonight, everybody, come on out to the Paris Hotel Casino. I'll be performing in the Anthony Cools Theater at 7 p.m. You can get tickets and information for that at taylorhughes.com/live. Then I travel a little bit. Let's see. Let's get to the good stuff. Knott's Berry Farm. I'm going to be at Knott's Berry Farm for their Halloween haunt, their Knott's Scary Farm, on September 27th through September 30th. 4 shows a night for that. So come on out. If you're going to the haunt, please come say hi. I'll be in the Birdcage Theater, and I'm so excited for that because that's like a bucket list place. I've wanted to perform. If you're in LA on the 25th, we've got our next About to Break live show that's going to be our Low Bar Variety Hour. This is where we bring local acts out and great performers, and we ask them to do stuff that's brand new. So it's a new material show that's at the Clubhouse Theater on the 25th of September, and that's in Los Angeles there off Vermont. So check that out. And then in October, I go back to Lake Tahoe. I'll be performing in Lake Tahoe, October 11th through the 16th. If you're in Tahoe, please come say hi. I'll be at the Loft. I was just there this last week. It's a beautiful theater. I can't wait to go there and play, and I can't wait to meet some new friends along the way. So anyway, guys, that's it. That's all I got to say. This is a great episode. I know you're going to love it. You guys know me. You know how much I love storytelling and how much that is a part of my life. And Harris says it so clearly here, but it's a huge part of everyone's journey. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode 88 of the About to Break podcast with my guest, Harris III.
No, I'm not a writer. Okay.
Something is about to break.
Hey everybody, welcome to About to Break. I'm your host, Taylor Hughes, and today I am sitting in Nashville, Tennessee with Harris III. Thank you for doing this, man.
Man, I'm excited.
I am so
love
excited.
This.
You know, it's funny. I've kind of the way all social media works. You know of people before you actually know them. And magic and illusion is such a small world that, you know, I've known of your work and seen you throughout the years online and different things that you've done. And then a couple weeks ago, we were at the Ultimate Magic Summer Camp for grown-ups, Magic Live.
In a town where grown-ups act like little kids.
Yeah. Yeah, totally, right. And I was like, I gotta go meet this guy. So,
well, I'm glad you did, man.
And now we're here in your hometown.
You obviously know me if we've connected on social media, because all of us are completely, truly ourselves on Instagram,
totally.
right?
Yeah, there's nothing's filtered, nothing's held back. Oh, I was joking about that with the audience last night. I was doing a piece with a Rubik's Cube, and I had a mixed one and a solved one. And I said, I held up the solved one. I said, this is your Instagram story. And then I held up the other one and said, this is real life.
Exactly. It's so true, man.
It's crazy
so
how...
true. My favorite is like all of the, they call them social media influencers.
That's like a job now?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some of them are making millions of dollars, but now they're all about transparency. But now even the transparency is like a part of their brand,
Right.
So it's like, is it really transparent? Right. Are you really being authentic right now?
Right. Yeah, man, it's a weird world we live in. And that's part of one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you. I mean, the whole podcast is about the reality of life and art and entertainment and creativity. And you are the person behind the Story Conference and a lot of work trying to help other artists be themselves and discover what they're passionate about. And how did that whole journey go from you, speaking of being an influencer, I mean, how did it go from you doing your own thing to saying, hey, maybe we could build a community around this?
I mean, the short version of the story sounds super selfish because it was essentially me going like, what if I could design the kind of conference that I want to go to? Like, who would I want to learn from? And I just went and booked all those speakers. I'm like, I want to hear from that guy. And I want to ask that guy questions. And so, it's basically me booking people that I want to learn from. And then 1,000 of my peers get to listen in essentially. It's, that's why we do what we do at Story, so that I can become a better storyteller. Right. We just let everyone else come along and enjoy the fun.
Oh, that's incredible. Now, did storytelling, was this always a part of your life, or when did you discover that you were a storyteller?
Yeah, I would argue that it's a part of everyone's lives. It's just most people aren't aware of it, right? So like when I was 11, performing, getting paid to finally perform like my first real shows at birthday parties and anyone that would let me do a magic show, nursing homes, wherever. I certainly didn't think like, oh, I'm a storyteller who does magic tricks. Right. I considered myself a magician or an illusionist. And I would say like in my early 20s, I had the story epiphany where I'm like, whoa, like everything is a story. Story is like the operating system of our brains. It's how we make sense of everything. And we are all telling a story verbally, non-verbally, and everyone is telling themselves a story about their interaction with you. So I know what I know of the Taylor Hughes story. It may not be true or not, but I've pieced it together based on the stories that you've told me, yourself in person, and the stories that I've told myself based on how I've experienced you, right? And so there's this, a lot of people call this a brand, but a brand is essentially a story that people tell themselves. So there's the Taylor Hughes story. And that means if we're all telling a story about who we are and how we see the world, we might as well be intentional about that story, right? And that's where most people aren't really thinking. It's like, what story are they really telling? So all artists, all performers, all marketers, all human beings, all stay-at-home moms, like we're all storytellers. We're all telling a story.
That's beautiful, man. I had maybe within the last 2 years, and it was my wife. I shouldn't say I had an epiphany. Like, thank God I have a wonderful woman who sees things long before they're obvious to me. I would have like one or two pieces in my show that were personal or that meant something to me, and the rest was just fun, silly magic. And one day she literally sat me down and was like, "Do you realize you're a storyteller? And when you do that, you're more fulfilled, and that's the stuff you always feel great about. Why isn't everything you do communicating a story?" And it blew my mind. I mean, as weird as it is, it's like, I'm 37 years old. I never thought about this before. But for me as an artist, it's totally shifted the way I approach everything now. Is what is the story? What are we trying to communicate? Not just what's a fun thing to do. And I'm sure you've seen this with musicians and actors and everybody who's trying to do something in the creative realm or as a speaker, helping them to discover what is their story and how can they better communicate that.
Yeah, for sure. I think your wife is right. Maya Angelou is famous for saying that people forget what they see you do. They will forget what they hear you say. They'll never forget how you make them feel. And the greatest way to make someone feel something is to tell them a story. And I think a lot of people are going through, whether it's their performance or their business that they're conducting, day to day, thinking like, oh, people are just going to remember the stuff I tell them. They're just going to remember it. Or they're going to remember the magic tricks that I performed because they were so visually fascinating.
Right, totally.
But it's all forgettable unless you connect with that audience or that person on an emotional level.
Absolutely.
And again, the easiest way to do that is by telling a story. So she was wise to recognize that in you, because those are the times that you were emotionally connecting with your audience. Those were the things that were unforgettable.
Right.
And a lot of us have experienced this as performers, right? Like, you know, how'd you cut that lady in half? Or like, how'd you make that car appear? Or, you know, we think that's what they're going to ask us after the show.
No,
that thing that
all.
we spent $10,000 on, like, you know, 10
spend
years
another
trying
5,000 shipping it across
yeah,
country.
exactly. And the hours and hours and hours, like thinking about like the perfect lighting scene or what the backdrop looks like, or, you know, and then they come up and they're like, man, I love that story you told about, you know, your grandmother giving you a box of magic tricks.
Yeah.
Or I love that trick where you made the coin disappear. And you're like, really? That's the thing that you want to talk about? And it's because it's the thing that emotionally connected with them, because they heard the story loud and clear.
And as, you know, artists in any different genre, that's really what we want, right? We want to connect with an audience, and we want whatever we create to matter, to impact them, or to encourage them, or to inspire them. And it's just so funny to me how long I went without realizing the part that story played in that.
Yeah. It's because we're all discontent with, you know, the way the world is. It doesn't matter what our worldview is. We all have things that we wish were different in our lives and in the world. Yeah. And really, storytellers are the ones that change that. Stories are the ones that restore. Stories are what sort of restore order in the world. There's one of my favorite quotes is from Saving Mr. Banks. Yeah. The screenwriter basically listened to obviously hours and hours and hours of, you know, footage with Walt Disney talking about, you know, everything from his approach to creativity and telling stories to just his personal worldview. And there was this idea that he communicated once in an interview about the role that storytellers play in the world. And she wrote it into the film. And Disney's character says, that's what we storytellers do. Yeah. We restore order with imagination and instill hope again and again and again. And what I love about that is what he's saying is like that what storytellers do, the role that we play in the world, is we restore order. In other words, we have to look in the world and find something that we think is broken. We're like, I'm not satisfied with the status quo. That like shouldn't be the way that it is. Right. We restore order. We do that with imagination. So that's what storytellers do. They tell you a story which stirs your imagination. And then that instills hope again and again and again. And so then if you apply that concept to even people who maybe weren't labeled storytellers, like, you know, Martin Luther King is a great example. And I'm like, hey, what was Martin Luther King? What was his vocation? People would think like, oh, he was an activist or a reverend or a public speaker. Yeah. But if you think about I Have a Dream speech, I mean, he was telling a story of a world that didn't exist. Right. So he told a story of that world to help people imagine it. That through imagination, he was restoring order. And then he did what great storytellers do. He basically extended his hand and invited people to come be a character in that story, to come help him create that new and better world. So it wasn't just a speech, it was a story. Yeah. Because it stirred people's imaginations to restore order in a place that things were broken in.
Oh, that's so beautiful, man.
Does that make sense?
It's getting me fired up, dude. It's so good. And I think that, you know, we could talk all day about, you know, we joked about social media, but the stories we tell ourselves about, you know, that I've got to filter this because it doesn't look good enough, or I've got to only share this part of the vacation because I got to care what other people think. How have you noticed as storytelling has become such a huge part of your life? How have you noticed, you know, people discovering that and what it means, not just for their profession, but for their personal life and how they communicate and how they have relationships? And
I think a lot of people, they live their life as if someone is handing them the script and that they don't have an option to write their own story. You know, a lot of us are just kind of going through this obliviously to the fact that someone else is trying to write our story. Because if you don't want to be intentional about the story that you write for yourself, like there are obviously plenty of corporations in this world that will write that story for you. Right. And this is why, you know, young teen girls are cutting themselves and why guys are committing suicide and, you know, people are addicted to drugs and alcohol. It's all because a script that has been handed to them. And they never stopped and paused and said, is this story true? They just believed it and told that story to themselves. We all just kind of need to wake up and go, gosh, is this the story I want to live? And if you begin to view your life as a story and that you get to be one of the authors of your story, it gives you more power and control over what you want your life to look like.
Oh, that's incredible, man. And when you guys do, so you're now in the third year of your story conference.
What is that experience like? I mean, tell people who are listening right now, because I mean, like you even said, you never thought of yourself as a storyteller.
Yeah.
You were a magician. Someone somewhere right now is doing a job that they could benefit, whether they're a stay-at-home mom, or they're a single dad, or they're an artist, or they're a dentist. I'm sure whatever they're doing, they could get some value out of this experience. What is that experience like for people?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people we don't really know how to describe story, because it's, it's obviously a conference, but someone said recently, it's like the love child of Cirque du Soleil and TED conference.
That's
or it's
I want to go. You had me there.
We've heard, it's like Disneyland for creative people. Like, we've heard described a lot of different ways, but essentially it's a 2-day conference with TED style talks from people who work in creative industries telling stories, like filmmakers and writers and experienced designers and Disney Imagineers. And they're coming to give talks around how people can become better storytellers. But it's a pretty immersive experience, because while we're talking about how to become better and more successful storytellers, we are immersing attendees in an experience. So like last year, for example, our theme was a carnival of curiosity. I really wanted to do something about the role of fear in the creative process.
Yeah.
And so we ended up framing the idea, a conversation about fear and the role of fear through the lens of curiosity. What might happen if you were to choose curiosity over fear? And so we had this carnival theme, wrote these backstories of like 9 different sideshow carnival characters.
Yeah.
Hired a bunch of improv actors. And so while you are sitting in a conference, listening to speakers talk to you about how to storytell, you go out in the lobby, and then all of a sudden you're like interrupted by this little vignette of these characters because there's a story that's unfolding all around you.
Yeah.
So it's pretty transformative. I mean, people leave quitting their jobs, making something that they've had on a shelf for 10 years that they would have never made, a book that needs to be written or a film that needs to be shot, or it's pretty awesome, and then we have, creative directors from Apple and Google and Disney, Cirque du Soleil. It's a pretty awesome mix of people.
Wow. What's that like, starting something and 3 years later, this is what it is? I mean,
Yeah.
It's got to be. I mean, there's got to be those moments where you're like, how is this what it is already?
Yeah. I mean, so technically I didn't really start Story. A buddy of mine named Ben Arment, got a bunch of friends together in 2009 in Chicago, and realized there was this void between artists who work in a bunch of different disciplines. Some were performers on stages, some were behind cameras, some were photographers, filmmakers, writers. And they were like, man, there's things about each other's creative process that we share in common. But when you get a bunch of photographers together and send them off to a trade show or a conference, they spend a lot of the time talking about gear or camera hacks or what latest Photoshop tutorial is. And then you never end up speaking to more of that root creative process about the story that you're telling. Right. And there's a book that had just come out by Robert McKee, which is kind of like the storytelling Bible in LA and Hollywood. Yep. And he was like, maybe we should just get together, learn from each other's different creative disciplines and talk about storytelling.
That's great. Because there's so many people who have, they bought all the gear. They've got the $10,000, $20,000 camera. And they still haven't gotten the story that they want to tell.
Yeah, then there are successful filmmakers that are far more successful than the guy with the camera who only have the iPhone in their pocket. It's because that person understands the power that stories have. Yeah. So, fast forward a few years, Ben was burned out, ready to move on to something else. And so we kind of started asking, how do we reinvent the idea of gathering people together around this idea of storytelling? And the new version, the much more public version of Story was launched, and here we are.
That's incredible, man. I think I've said that's incredible 500 times in 15 minutes.
I think it's like in your subconscious, because when you do magic for a living, that's probably what you hear every night when you walk off stage. People are like, Taylor, that was incredible.
Oh, please. No, it's cool to me, because this is something that has been it's been stirring inside me, and yet I don't hear most people talk about it. It is something that, and you've been at it a while with storytelling, but there is, even in LA, we have a community of storytellers, and there's like the Moth and like all these different things. But even people who are entrenched in that community still underplay the value of what they're doing, because they think, well, this can't ever turn into anything professional or financial, or and you guys are really taking that passion they have and translating it into apply this to everything.
Yeah. I mean, it is literally everything that's shaping everything that you love about the world around you.
Right.
And everything that is shaping everything you hate about the world around you. That is being done by storytellers. You know, I mentioned girls cutting themselves earlier. That's because of a fashion industry that uses a certain model type, and they look in the mirror and they go, well, my waist isn't that size, and my face doesn't look like theirs. And, you know, that develops this insecurity because marketing works best sometimes if you create a void and a need for the product that you're selling. And so they tell a story to young girls that create an insecurity that leads to things that brand never really hoped would happen. They're not proud of the fact that there are kids, you know, cutting themselves, but it's happening because of a narrative that they have put into the world, whether it was intentional or not. And then, so that means like there are storytellers that are literally hurting people.
Wow.
And then, but likewise, you know, my friend Scott Harrison, who runs an organization called Charity Water, amazing organization that's literally changing lives, not just changing lives, saving people's lives around the world in third world countries who don't have access to clean water. And, you know, they have revolutionized fundraising in the nonprofit space. And if Scott were sitting at this table right now with us and we're like, how are you saving so many lives right now? He'd be like, we're just telling great stories. You know, the heart of Charity Water's success has been storytelling. So that means storytellers are powerful. They can save lives. They can literally destroy lives. And if we begin to realize how powerful we are as storytellers, I think it will give us permission to stop playing small, to stop hiding, and to really embrace the role that we can play in the world. You know, everything as parents, as spouses, as teachers, as cops, you know, like we look at the stuff that's taking place in our culture. Almost every cultural issue that's in the news right now really boils down to a storytelling problem. You know? All of the international issues that are taking place around our world, it's just a storytelling problem. It's other countries that have a misperception of the other countries around them. They're just not hearing each other, or there's a story that they're telling themselves to be true about another country. And they just don't know that it's not true because they haven't taken the time to sit down face to face and see each other as human beings.
And we can look at that and be discouraged, or we can go, there's hope if we tell a different story, if we reframe it, if we give people a different way to look at things.
Yeah, stories don't write themselves. I mean, they do if we just let them, but it's because we're just going through the motions and allowing the story to write itself. But like, we get to write the story. So like, you can just stand by, and we're already writing them anyway. You know? Every time you post a photo to Instagram and write that caption, that is another, you know, it's another paragraph, another chapter, whatever you want to look at. It's another sentence of the story that you're telling the world. And so like, I just feel like we should be a little bit more honest and intentional about the story that we tell.
Man, when we ran into each other at Magic Live, and I threw this random idea of, hey, what if we did a podcast? And I told you what the podcast is about, and you said, well, yeah. I mean, I had a moment where I almost walked away from performing altogether. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, and what that journey was like for you?
Yeah, man. You know, it's easy for it to become a long story, no pun intended. But you know, I got my magic kit, as a lot of kids did, when I was 9. So it took a couple years until I finally like did a legit show. And by legit, I mean like 30 minutes of bad magic in front of, you know, some old folks in a nursing home that I'd volunteered.
You did 30 minutes? That was great.
Yeah. I think my first birthday party show was supposed to be like 30 minutes, and somehow it went like 2 hours because I had no concept of how long the tricks would be.
I know. You spend 5 minutes in between. I remember taking the prop and putting it back and then setting up, and then like I literally would set up the trick in front of the
Take this next 2-minute intermission while I set up my next trick and not talk to you at all.
Exactly.
You know, so like fast forward to 21, I had essentially like, you know, I'd made, I think, probably $1 million doing magic shows around the world, and everything from, you know, cruise ships to company parties to schools and churches. And what happened was there was this season that I got to where everything came crashing down, and I was like, I don't even know what's real, you know? Because everyone told me if I lived in the right house, in the right part of town, in the right wealthy suburb, in the right neighborhood, wearing the right clothes and hanging out with the right celebrities, then like life would be awesome. And here I was at 21, and life didn't seem so awesome. And I kind of felt like I'd been lied to.
Yeah.
And it's interesting if you perform magic tricks, if you trick people for a living, and then you ask yourself, how did I get tricked into believing all this stuff?
Oh my gosh, buddy.
Yeah. And then notice there was this pretty strong correlation between how magic tricks work and how all lies work. And so that kind of like set me off on this mission to to speak to people around the world about exposing the things that are fake, that aren't real, so they could discover a life that is real. And the reason I start the story that way is because it's really ironic, because by the time I was 30, 9 to 10 years later, I was like, I don't even know what is real anymore. Because when you spend your time traveling around the world full time, 300 days a year going, that's fake, that's fake, that's fake, that's fake.
Right.
And then you do this, you start researching and figuring out we take in like 4,000 to 5,000 messages a day. That's like hard to wade through. And you go, there's so much fake. I don't even know if anything is real. So I went to a dark place, man. I was pretty apathetic and passive and incredibly cynical. So cynical. And I was doing this thing at a 4th of July party. I was doing a fire breathing act and set my face on fire. Made this really stupid mistake. Pride came before the fall. Yeah. And set my face on fire only for like 7 or 8 seconds, but it was enough to have second-degree burns all over my face. The pictures are nasty, And long story short, had a couple weeks of no shows, was laying on my couch feeling sorry for myself, asking like, why do you do this stuff? Yeah. Why do you blow giant fireballs out of your mouth? Why do you jump in tanks of water wearing straitjackets and chains? Like, this is really dumb stuff that we do, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And around that same time, I'd become a dad. And obviously, it was like it had already started to impact the way that I see the world. But in that moment, I specifically remember looking down at my son, who was like 6 months old, and he was like kind of rolling around on the floor. And at the time that I was like ready to quit magic and didn't know what was real, I looked down and had this quintessential dad moment where I was like, oh my gosh, like this is magic.
Yeah. This is the realest thing ever.
It's ironic that, people call us magicians because we don't perform magic. They're just tricks. But there's this real stuff in the world around us that is genuinely magical, and people think that stuff is fake. Yeah. Yeah. So we go see a psychic and we're like, that's so real. And it's fake. And then we like go have this experience and we're like, it's just whatever, we roll our eyes. And so basically before my cynicism, robbed my kids of the real magic that is in and through everything, me becoming a dad awakened me to what real magic is. And I would say like that whole season kind of gave birth to this reawakening of wonder and reminding me why I do magic. Yeah. And that was, if you look back, that was 3 years ago. That was the season that I stepped into all these new endeavors, that I became more than just a magician, because I felt like, magic wasn't just the thing that people watch magicians do on stage. Magic is it's these things that are intangible and transcendent, these experiences that people have that they can't put into words. Yeah. So when people watch you, find their card or make something levitate or make something disappear, they're not seeing magic. That childlike wonder that they feel, that's hard to put into words in response to the thing that they watched you do. Yeah. That's magic. And I realized that means that we have the opportunity to create magic in more places than just on stage in a magic show. Yeah. So now it's whether it's through consulting or producing a conference for Story, other storytellers like Story, or, still performing magic from time to time. Yeah. It's really all about how do we awaken wonder to the possibility of what could be, so we can all live a different story and tell a different story.
That's beautiful. When you find yourself in those moments where those old thoughts start creeping back, that old, what am I doing this for? There's still got to be moments where, those fleeting thoughts of like, oh man, this is a lot of work to help people see life differently. You know what I mean? Yeah. What do you do to encourage yourself in that?
It's the transformation. The story is a transformation for people, and it's transformed my own life too. Just the irony of you and I talking right now, like, when I was in that dark place, I guess 4 years ago now, like I would have never done a podcast interview with another magician. It's like you're my competition, dude. You know what I mean? Like, and like, Story has been this amazingly collaborative experience where I think it transformed my own life from a place, like a mentality of like scarcity, where you see everything and everyone as competition, to like, now I just have this attitude of abundance. Like Story is so much more beautiful than it would have been if I would have done it on my own. We can do so much more together than we can by ourselves. And so now there's so much work to be done in the world. Right. And there's so many stories to be told. Like, let's just partner together and do what we can and work together to make this world look a little bit different than it already does.
That's so huge, man.
So I think it's just its impact. It's impacted me so much in my own life. Like, I can't imagine not doing it.
Yeah.
I can't not do it.
You bring up collaboration, and for years I was like this little silo of, I would do my thing, and I'd see guys from time to time, different creatives or magicians or whatever
At a conference like the one we were at in Vegas.
Yeah, like a magic summer camp, or, you run into each other, you both get booked on a similar show or something. Sure. And for years, I never really valued input from other creative people, or not even just input about the work, but just their life story and what that can mean. And the last couple of years has just been so freeing, where it's just been like, my new saying is I want to treat life like summer camp. I mean, everyone who went to summer camp as a kid had a great time. And why? Because you said, I'm here to have a good time and I'm here to make friends. And I've just realized that collaboration of not being close-handed and feeling like you have to be fearful that if someone else hears something you're doing, that then they're going to take away an opportunity from you. And just like you're saying, it's like there's an abundance of opportunities.
So much.
And the more we can help each other, the better.
Yeah. And the more you practice that collaboration and celebrating others, like, it changes your heart. Like, it changes your identity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I remember the very first time that I celebrated another magician online, and he was performing at the Magic Castle in LA.
Yeah.
And I told all my non-magician friends in LA to go to the castle and see his act. And none of them thought that was weird. I'm the only one that it felt weird to, right? Because we get trapped in our own little bubbles.
And the other guy was probably like, how cool that he would do that.
Yeah, he was like blown away.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what to make of it. It's like, I'm sorry, you're sending, like, couldn't like some of these people like my magic and like refer me to their friend? I'm like, yeah, of course they could.
Yeah,
but like,
fine.
There's so much opportunity out there. Like, let's just work together and collaborate and make each other better. And I think we're scared of it because we've never tried it. But once you see the light and you've experienced that community and collaboration, like, I can't ever imagine going back,
It's the best.
But that wonder being awakened you is the only thing that can do that,
Yeah. Yes, seeing that life could be different and that things could be better, and it's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
How can people find out more? I can't believe we're nearing the end here, Harris. How can people get more? I know you guys do your own podcast. I want to talk about that. I want to pitch the conference here. So
yeah, I mean, Story 2018 is the website for this year's conference. It's coming up in a few short weeks, so this might have even already aired, but you can obviously keep tabs on this year if it's the last second, or next year. But yeah, we do a lot of different gatherings in different cities. So you can just go to storygatherings.com. And that will just kind of like, tell you in general what Story is all about. It's really about, not just this annual conference, but a community of storytellers who gather together in a variety of ways throughout the year, whether that's online or in person in their city or on the podcast or whatever. But yeah, storygatherings.com.
That's great. And how can people find out more about you personally?
Yeah, just at Harris III. Harris III is this weird name. Harris is, we don't have time to go into that. But I really am a third. I am the third Harris in my family, but I'm the first, magician, storyteller in my family. Yeah. But yeah, just at Harris I everywhere, Twitter, Instagram, and domain. So look it up.
Awesome. Guys, if you're listening right now, go click on the show notes, and I'll have links to all of those, so you can just click right here from wherever you're listening. Harris, thank you so much for doing this, man.
Man, it's a huge honor. What you're doing is important and needed, and it's a pleasure to be a part of it.
I appreciate you being a part of it. Thank you, man.